So what happens when it becomes a disease? Well, in the next few slides, I'm going to show you for you to see what a candida infection actually is. But first of all, we're going to look at SIFO as a new term that is emerging. Now, a lot of you may be familiar with the term SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Now we also have SIFO as a term referring to small intestinal fungal overgrowth. And it basically refers to to excess fungal growth in the small bowel that is attributed to a candida species. Now, SIFO has been associated with IBS type symptoms, and they include those like flatulence and bloating and so on. And its clinical presentation can often be hard to differentiate from SIBO. And what happens is that often patients will present with a mix of SIBO and SIFO, which then presents challenges to diagnosis and treatment. So really understanding how candida works and what it's doing is going to be crucial in order to help us best target our treatments. In the next few slides, I'm going to briefly highlight some of those key factors and those contributing factors that can disrupt the natural balance of candida. But I'm going to show you this first, the infection pathway of candida, what happens here when it overgrows. Now, this is a visual representation of the pathway infection, and I'm going to briefly discuss this 4-point process in the next few slides as well. So the first point in that pathogenesis pathway is a compromised host. So if a host is compromised, then there are many things that can disrupt the normal balance of candida in the body, including things like lifestyle factors and medications and immune disorders and other inflammatory conditions. So all of these factors that you can see listed here in the next slide can influence the amount or the type of stimulation that the immune system receives, and therefore that will affect inflammation. Now, I'm going to just briefly talk about something simple here, like nutrition. How does nutrition play a role, or how it might play a role? Well, we know that high carbohydrate diets, primarily those that are in the simple, processed and refined carbohydrate group, they are correlated with high candida levels in the gut. So if an individual is generally consuming a range of simple sugars as part of their regular dietary intake and habit, and they are in some way compromised, say, for example, they might be on antibiotics, or they're experiencing periods of ongoing or chronic stress, or there might be something else happening in their lives, and their immune system is not going to be therefore as strong as it could be in order to control that candida overgrowth. And what candida does then, it uses these carbohydrates that are entering through this diet as a primary source of energy, because they provide a sugar component that candida needs in order to strengthen its own cellular structure and survival. So dietary intake does play a crucial part in ensuring that we are not feeding an infection if our immune system and our defenses are not optimal. Now, another key factor that I want to highlight is the disturbance to the natural balance of the microbiome. So the protective bacteria in the gut and those colonies in the gut that are supposed to keep everything in balance. Now, the protective bacteria in the gut, which is the lactobacillus, is what keeps candida under control in healthy people. If that beneficial bacteria is disrupted, it's destroyed, or it's out of balance, then there isn't sufficient levels or quantities of lactobacillus to support our immune system and control candida. As a result, candida will start to overgrow, it'll start to proliferate and disperse and become infective. Now, this is why any disruption to that beneficial lactobacilli colonies, say from antibiotic use, for example, promotes candida proliferation, and why some women who take antibiotics will end up with episodes of vaginal thrush. So what makes candida such an infective pathogen? Well, the second step in candida infection is the adhesion. And when we look at candida a lot more closely, it is primarily made of some really intricate carbohydrate and protein structures. So the organism itself is made up of a complex carbohydrate and protein structure. And when the normal balance of candida is disrupted and it starts to overgrow and become infected, these structures that make up candida as an organism will help it to adapt, will help it to survive, will help it to adhere to mucosal surfaces such as the vaginal lumen, for example.